Good morning, everybody. I wonder who's up. I'm realizing what I'm singing here. Okay, I'm going to give it a couple minutes here while I wait for the word to get out. Let's see if you can see that thing. Let's see what's on camera and what's not. This will give me a little idea on what's happening. Again, stand by for a second. I'm doing a real fun, impromptu drawing lesson number 4. And we'll see if there's enough audience to actually do this. See if I can monitor it this time. Been having some connection problems. I don't know if it's the weather or what it is, but we'll see. We'll see if it works. So anyhow, good morning, everybody. I don't know about you where you are, but here in California, we're supposed to have the worst rain we've ever had, or not ever had, but pretty damn bad, put it that way. And I'm excited, really excited about that. We'll see what starts to happen. I'm hoping for a torrential downfall. So we'll see if that's actually what happens. So happy Sunday. Now I still seem to be having problems monitoring this for some darn reason. So actually somebody say something. I see Annette. Good morning, Annette, and a little something there from Milo. Hey, this is going to be kind of fun because I'm showing you just a messy drawing table, which is what I learned to draw on when I was a kid. And I found any surface I could find, be it the kitchen table or the desk at school that I was supposed to be doing my lessons on, and I would use it to draw. So you get to see my hand and a little drawing lesson. Let me stand up here real quick and see if I can see who's on yet. I see Annette. I see Megan. I'll stand up from time to time and see if I can see everybody. But if you save the comments till the end, it'll make it easier for me to keep flowing. Once my brain starts going, it's easier just to just keep drawing. So this morning, what I'm going to do is pick up a little bit from where we left off. But remember, we just got through before doing the contour. But in order to go forward in some really cool stuff, I need to talk a little bit about this thing called an ellipse, the mysterious ellipse. And this seems a little more boring, perhaps, but without knowing how to draw the ellipse, you're not going to be able to move forward in anything, really, that I'm teaching you, because the ellipse is basically another word for a circle in perspective. So a circle in perspective is something you need to learn to practice. Basically what it means is, remember we talked about the horizon line? Horizon line is, let's draw an invisible person from a cartoon character from the back. The horizon line is essentially the eye level of the viewer who's looking at your painting or drawing. It's where their eyes are, and we're looking at this translucent cartoon character here, transparent. This is eye level, or otherwise known as the horizon line, HL or EL. Everything above this and below this is going to change. Everything to the right and left is going to change. So you can think about left and right. And the eye level and the center of vision, CV, which is right between the bridge of your nose, can change. And you'll see artists make that choice as to whether you want this point to be over here, or way low, whether we have a low, like a bug's eye view, or whether we go way up high and have a bird's eye view. That's all up to you. But right now we're going to keep it pretty easy and just talk about eye level. Eye level or horizon is kind of really where the earth ends. If you had nothing out in front of you, no mountains, no buildings, no trees, and you were just to see the subtle change of the earth as it disappeared because of the curvature of the earth. I mean, technically, there might be a very small roundness to it because it's the earth. But we keep it pretty straight in drawing as artists. So an ellipse, a circle in perspective, is, let's draw one, let's keep in mind this sort of center of vision and eye level. Let's say we're looking as a person in the center of this page, and we are to try to draw an ellipse. Circle in perspective. Eye level's here. Let's say it's a plate, and we're looking at a plate directly straight on the edge. So when it's eye level, this plate is going to be pretty flat, other than in case it has a little bit on the bottom. But let's just say it's a flat disc. It's going to look like this. We're right on the horizon line. We're right on eye level. And all we see is a flat edge. But as this moves up in space, up higher, above the horizon line, the ellipse is going to get a little bit rounder, It's going to keep going that way, and I'm kind of loosely doing this. Most of the lessons I'm doing with you guys are purposely eyeballing. It's all about eyeballing. So you don't think about everything having to be flawlessly perfect. It's one thing about art that's, again, different than photography or anything else. Sometimes human error and the beauty of perfection in imperfection, as I say, can be kind of cool. You can see this is kind of curving out a little bit. So look at the distance here. Look at how it's only a thin amount when we just barely get away from that eye level. And then as we go out, this distance keeps growing. And it would grow smoothly and incrementally. Also, my ellipses are very loose here. I'm not getting hardcore. If we were taking a formal perspective class, the instructor would come around and he'd say, get those sides, the left and right side of your ellipse to match. You know, get them perfectly the same amount of curvature on one side to be the same amount on the other, and that's true. But you can eyeball it a little bit. Other thing I would recommend is when you're first drawing ellipses, don't try to do them in one swoop like this. You know, feel free to do it in several lines. Just kind of figure your way around these ellipses. Now, what is important is, what is the number one amateur thing that people do when they don't really understand ellipses? What do they do? What is the most common thing? Well, it's this. And off to the side here, I'm pretty sure you can still see my drawing. You'll see this when you see people first trying to draw an ellipse. This football shape. Let's say someone's drawing a glass when they're, just first trying to draw outside of stick figures. They'll do this sort of thing. They'll draw the edges of the glass, then they may draw the bottom like this. Sometimes they don't even draw it to match. This is not an ellipse. That's the incorrect way to draw an ellipse. Ellipse will always have rounded edges. What it really is, when you take formal perspective, is they teach you to draw a square. When you first get into real formal perspective, you draw a cube, for example, like this, which we'll get into later because this is more about perspective. But they'll draw a cube and they'll say, okay, draw the center line of that cube. Remember we talked about center line in perspective is not always right in between the lines, but sometimes, for example, when it's off to your left, it's going to be a little further over to the left in the center. Again, we'll get more into that later. Basically, the ellipse you learn to draw on cubes, and you find the points that are the middle of each area, and then you draw your circle on that cube. So it just barely touches that center point, just barely touches that center point over here. Swoops around, just barely touches that one, and it's all nice and round. And then you can, again, I'm purposely using a pencil because they're kind of clumsy, and you can correct yourself, you can rethink it, you can use an eraser a little bit. So there is an ellipse off to the left. These ellipses, for example, we could all put edges on, or let's put edges on some of them. These aren't exactly the same size. That's okay. That's a shape. It doesn't have to be a perfect cylinder. And if I was to put edges on the bottom and top and leave the bottom one just the front edge, we start to create cylinders or pieces of cylinders on these ellipses. This one might have another one here. We've kind of cut them apart, right? So it's really important to draw ellipses, to learn to draw ellipses. And if these were to go to the left and right of the center line, it does exactly the same thing as this, except it will go in this direction, left and right of your center line. So if you're to start to draw ellipses this way, you can barely fit an ellipse in there, it's going to be like a plate. The plate is going to be right on its edge here. It's going to be real thin here. By the time it gets out here, you know, an ellipse might be something like this. Oops, gee, I got off there. It's really kind of, when you're doing it by hand, you know, you'll make mistakes. Just go back and try to eyeball it. Make sure your ellipses are rounded off, that there's no football corners or sharp corners. That's not an ellipse, it's a totally different shape. But as we get out here, broader we get out, the broader, more open your ellipse becomes, right? Because we're getting further away from the center of vision, where we're looking right on the edge of something. Okay, so play around with this. Practice ellipses. If you want, try to draw, just draw them freehand. Just you kind of, one way to do it too is just get your hand moving like this, kind of like the same way we did our thing like this, but get your hand moving, draw a line in the middle, then eyeball it and see if you can get both sides to be about the same. Remember, it's getting smaller and narrower towards the outside, swinging around and coming back this way. Doing the same on this side, swinging around, coming back this way. These are very loose freehand ellipses, not perfect, not meant to be perfect, because we're dealing with the idea of kind of loose, organic drawing here right now. We can get more into theory and get it as tight as, a mechanical drawing if we wanted, but this is all about eyeballing things. Okay? So that's the first thing I want you guys to do today on this rainy day. Start practicing ellipses. Take an entire page like this and just practice. Practice those ellipses. I've been doing them for a long time, so I can get them fairly close just by doing what I'm doing. And that's what, if you're drawing something, again, like a glass, you're going to always do the thing like I said, about wrapping tape, when we were wrapping the tape around things? Well, the ellipses, when you're drawing a glass, depending on where this is, we'll just make it a little bit more open, a little bit wider on the bottom, since let's say our eye level is up here and we're looking down on the glass. Well, if we were looking on the edge of the glass on eye level, it's going to be completely flat and come on down, and the bottom would be rounded. But as it gets down below our eye level, EL, it opens up a little bit. By the time it gets down to the bottom of the glass, it's a little bit more round. Might be something like this. But see how I draw the back of it? Draw the back of my ellipse, just to know the right curvature on the bottom. And then you can erase that out if you want, if you don't need it, unless it's a transparent thing and you want to kind of see the back of that glass. This is really helpful if you're designing tiki mugs and things like that, because this helps you get your base thing down. Then you could draw these lines on here like this if you wanted. And then remember the center line thing? Well, if we're off to the right of this looking at it, the center line's not going to be right in the center. It's going to be off to the side just a little bit, depending on how far away you are. And it's going to curve over. That piece of tape is going to curve over the top. And when you start with something like this, see, that's okay to get messy. See, you're going to go like that. You're going to go. You're going to make little mistakes. No problem. That this is sketching. Sketch means just feeling things out, feeling out the drawing. Because then we're going to get into lots more with this, where once you start to draw something like this, you can start cutting into it and chunking into it and doing other things, once you understand this first principle. So the ellipse is elusive and mysterious, but extremely important in learning to draw. It's basically just a circle that is taken and bent over into perspective in your block. Remember, I always talk about the box of fog, that we're no longer, as artists in this class, thinking about this as a hard piece of glass where you can only do stick figures anymore. It's not about flat. It's about that this has become a block of fog that we're going to step inside of and start picking things up and molding them and shaping them. So practice your ellipses. And if you have questions at the end of this, just ask me. But there's a lot of different resources online, too. If you look up how to draw an ellipse, you will see things on YouTube. It's a great resource. But again, if you really want to know the origin of the ellipse and how they teach it to a lot of us in formal drawing classes, it's basically, start with a cube, and if you're not comfortable yet with drawing a cube, it's okay, we'll get into that. But an ellipse is basically a circle in perspective, if you were to draw it on a cube, and all these different areas where it just barely touches these sides, you'll start to understand what makes an ellipse do what it does based on drawing it inside of a cube. Don't worry about being perfect. I mean, a technical drawing, someone might say, hey, this is a little bit different. Your ellipse is wrong. You'll get people who are perspective Nazis. And they'll say, wait a second, you're slightly off here. And technically, that's not exact what theoretically that ellipse should do. Well, of course. I mean, we could mathematically figure this out forever and get everything flawless. But that's not what drawing is about, at least for me. It's about having the ability to have error that actually helps create life in a line. That these lines start to have energy, and you can almost start to feel the thinking in a really good sketch. The artist is thinking through line. There's a term that we use called think with your pencil. Basically, when you go to design school, it's sit down and just start doing this and thinking, and you'll come up with ideas that you wouldn't have in your mind without actually starting to create the illusion of a three-dimensional thing starting to take shape in front of you. I can't tell you how many rainy days like this when I was a kid were so much fun, because I would get this piece of paper, and this piece of paper, I could be anywhere. I could do anything. I could be anywhere. I could say, "Hey, I want to build something, Grandpa. Grandpa, I want to build an airplane." I remember the first airplane I ever made out in my grandpa's workshop. I'm going to share something with you. It's a character that I'm actually going to incorporate in a book that I'm writing. I hope I can get it written while I'm still alive.